Hello my friends, my name is Skylar of the Woolix Variety, and we are getting back to this day dress from 1837 to 1840. I'm going to keep the intro short because I'm tired and there's a lot we need to get through. So starting off, I made one last mock-up. I lied at the end of the last one, or sometime in the last one, when I said that I was done making mock-ups. I made another one. I decided that I still didn't like the fit of the mock-up I ended up with, so I did another one, and it is also going to function as the middle layer of our bodice because I've decided to make the bodice 3 layers. The bodice fashion fabric, the muslin layer, and then a red layer that goes up against my body. That is the most comfortable of the fabrics, so that's the one that's touching me. I quickly sewed those muslin layers together using a really wide, really bad stitch. It doesn't matter, you're not going to see it. We're never going to talk about it again. We're not going to talk about it. For the first important bodice layer, which is the layer that's going up against my skin, I cut out the same pieces that I cut out for the muslin layer, and I began sewing them together with my very first attempt at a French seam, which is where you sew them wrong sides together first, and then trim the seam, and then flip them, iron them, and sew them right sides together. So you have, in theory, a little itty bitty seam that encompasses any of the raw undercooked edges of the fabric. It didn't go fantastically. I will redeem myself later, I swear. They're not cute. These seams are not cute, and I did not successfully encompass all of the raw edges at all. Next, I worked on sewing the muslin layer and the red bodice layer together. Not very well, mind you, but they are attached and that's all that matters. After that, I started sewing some boning channels. I took the plastic zip ties that I'll be using as my boning, and I measured them up against the muslin layer and drew out some lines and followed those lines with my sewing machine to create just a little tube that the boning will slide very nicely into. Next, I started to prepare some zip ties for inserting into the boning channels. I have a pair of scissors that used to be fabric scissors that have since grown dull, and I don't know how to sharpen them. So those are now the boning scissors. I chopped the boning pieces down to a size that would appropriately fit within the tubes that I have sewn into this bodice, and hit them all with a nail file to try and prevent them from, busting out, jailbreak style. After I put together my boning channels, I then started to assemble a completely unrelated new chair. I then started to shove my bones into their bone zones. I then shoved the boning pieces, the bones, into their boning zones, never to be seen or heard from again. I then took the second mock-up from the last video, and I had trimmed it down to fit the newest mock-up because I had made it smaller. I made the mock-up for the final mock-up is smaller than the one from last time. I trimmed it down so it fit the same size, and then cut out all of my fashion fabric bodice pieces. In addition to the bodice pieces, I cut out a rectangle that would be about the length of my bodice that would go front and center. I made like a little taco out of it, and in between the folds of the shell of the taco, I inserted a very small tube of the red fabric as an accent, and I very carefully sewed along the length of it, trying to capture the little red bit in between the bodice pieces. It did not go fantastically, as later on part of it did start to come out. Apparently I missed some of it and didn't know at the beginning, but I had to fix that later. So make sure you're really good about sewing your taco together. So now I began to redeem myself from my alpha French seams from earlier with some slightly better French seams. They're still not perfect. There are still little bits where you can see the thread sticking out of them, but it's like Montreal versus Marseille. Still not Paris, but at least Marseille is in the right country. I then cut out another sleeve shape, slightly longer than the drafting panel piece that I had, the mock-up piece, slightly longer than the mock-up piece to make up for the fact that it was not long enough. Who would have thought? Then came the insufferable process of measuring 2.5 inches down from the under the arm seam, moving 3.5 inches in, drawing a line, making the same line with the same measurements, exactly 2 inches below the first line, measuring every 0.25 inch, and then drawing many more lines to make our cartridge pleats. It's not gatherings in the sleeve, it's cartridge pleats. I then took a needle and ran it through every one of the points where the lines intersect, the little lines on the long line going straight across. I tried to get them as even as humanly possible, the length of these stitches. Otherwise, you can tell that I fucked up. That if you have to be careful, or they can tell you can fuck up. You have to be careful or they can tell that you did fuck up. I then crossed my fingers and tugged them into the right length, and they looked okay, surprisingly. This is another one of those things that I've never done before. Gathering? Yes. Measured cartridge pleats? No. I took all of my remaining fabric and I began measuring out 3.5 yards for the skirt, or at least what I thought would be 3.5 yards. Apparently at the time I forgot that my measuring tape is not a yard, but in fact 60 inches, 5 feet. I measured out 3 lengths of 5 feet, which I didn't find out until much later. I then started to lay out my fabric and drew a line 15 inches in from the bottom to make it shorter for my tiny little legs. Eventually I was able to cut off 15 inches from the entire length of the skirt. That was 2 yards too long. I then hung up my fabric for the night so it could do whatever stretching it needed to do. This was when I realized that it was too long. I was wrapping it around my mannequin, I was pinning it up, and once I got to like the 3rd wrap around of the mannequin, I realized there was far too much length left for me to have measured this correctly. So I took my measuring tape and I realized it was 60 inches, and I plugged my numbers into a calculator and I realized I had far more yardage than I wanted. So I cut it off. The next day I came back in and I sewed the hem of the skirt along the selvage so I didn't have to take more time to do a rolled hem. It's the selvage, it's not gonna fray. I didn't care. I then pleat and gathered the skirt into the waistband with my dad fuel mug watching approvingly. I then plunged a needle into that mess over and over again so nothing could escape except for the pins that I would tug out shortly. I then ironed all those pleats down about 3 inches just to make sure they held the shape. They were nice and crisp. And I wanted to make sure that the waistband had as little bulk as possible because I know I had made the waistband not historically appropriate. Not that any part of this project was historically appropriate, but historically speaking, for this particular dress, the waistband would only be one layer with a very small hem along both the top and bottom to take off an entire layer of potential bulk. No. For the last couple days of this project, because I had set myself a deadline, and I was growing very close to it. I was about a day and a half away from when I decided I needed this dress done by. So I entered this weird fever dream state where I was going as fast as I could. I don't remember anything that happened, and at some point I threw caffeine on top of it and I was vibrating, like just, you know. So we're gonna have to talk through most of this because I don't have a ton of footage, a ton of usable footage at least. We'll figure it out together. You know those jokes that people post online where cosplayers only know one pose and it's just... I finished the sleeves by gathering the top of the sleeve and the bottom and added on our wrist cuffs and armbands that we made in the last video to cover up all of the threads. I had to put a gore on the back of these sleeves. I don't know if you can see it. There is a piece of fabric right here just to add some additional movement to my arm because the armbands are very tight and I couldn't really do a whole lot because my arm was suffocating. So I put in a gore, I sewed it up, and then I attached it to the bodice very messily. I then made this collar piece. Initially there was supposed to be a ruffle attached to it. No. I made the collar piece, ironed it, sewed it all together, sewed it to the bodice, did a lot of adjustments. There are adjustments on the shoulder, like right here, and then back behind the shoulder right here, just to make sure it all fit as snugly as possible. I know I don't have any footage of this at all, so I began to sew on all of the hooks and eyes. There were 14, I think, along my back, one in each wrist cuff, and then one bigger one on the back of the skirt to hold it on. I then gave everything one giant final press to make sure it's all nice and crisp, and it was done. I think I've said everything I did. With that, I am going to make some minor adjustments to my appearance. I'm going to get changed, and in theory, we'll have like a final product reveal montage. I'll be back. final thoughts. Boy howdy, she does not know how to stay in place. Let me just tug. I don't know what happened here. I may go in and just take a couple stitches to make it less, I don't know what word would accurately describe whatever this is. You know how like in Minecraft there will be those mountains that have just like a cliff and then nothing under them? This is what this sleeve reminds me of. It's one of those Minecraft cliffs. I don't know if you can see it, or there's just nothing under it. It's just oblivion. I do like how big the sleeves are. The sleeves, other than that puff thing, came out great. There are some crinkles. She could fit a little better, but overall I am quite happy with how this project turned out. Could be better, but it also could be significantly worse, which I think is a good way to look at it. So I think with that, it's safe to say that we are done. I'm done. I'm done with this. It only took like a week and a half, like a non-stop sewing. So she's cute. She's cute. I might wear the skirt out just like on its own with something else. The skirt is really cute, one of my better skirts. The bodice doesn't stay put enough to wear it out, but it's great for costume. I think that's all I have. I think that's it. I need to take some pictures. So I probably should not have taken off the wig, but thanks for watching. If you stuck out this long, if you stuck around this long, I'm thoroughly surprised, and thank you from the deepest trenches of my heart. Consider sticking around. I have another really big project planned soon, bigger than this one. Before that, I might do a smaller project. I have a very particular one in mind, and I don't know if that would be interesting to watch at all, but I might anyways. So, okay, love you, bye!